Right, let's deal with the elephant in the room first. Yes, I am a Brit, and yes, this is a video criticising Lewis Hamilton. I appreciate that might be a confusing concept for you all, but don't worry, as it's only a matter of time before #TeamLH find me anyway. So I don't know about you, but I'm getting the impression #Blessed really doesn't care about F1 in 2024 anymore. We already know he's off to Maranello for 2025, and if you look at the way he comes across in interviews, it's pretty clear he's thrown this season in the can already, just after 3 races. This is year 3 of Mercedes sniffing glue behind the Brackley bins and churning out a car that handles a bit too much like the one Diana had in 1997. It was in fact so it took just a seat fit prior to pre-season testing for Lewis to decide he was better off with the Italians. But is it all just the team's fault? Oh crap, here come Team LH again. After 2021 ended the way it did, Hamilton had all the drive in the world to take back his 8th World Championship. And the following year, despite his W13 doing its best to make alphabetic spaghetti out of his spinal cord, you could see that determination at several points. I think Silverstone might be the best example here. Come the end of 2022, however, the Briton found himself behind his teammate in the standings for the first time since 2016. That teammate being Magic Mike himself, George Russell, who took the team's only pole position and win that year in Hungary and Brazil respectively. Now, it was widely accepted at the time that whilst Russell beat Lewis on the stat sheets, Hamilton hadn't necessarily lost any of his speed, and he began to back that up in the first half of 2023, taking a sensational pole in Hungary, whilst Russell was busy finding himself in whatever tyre wall he could find. As the 2023 season rolled on, however, you could see Hamilton's confidence in the team begin to slip.
Tough day in the office, to be honest. Real struggle out there with our car.
This was all despite Lewis being in a realistic scrap with the Mexican Minister of Being for P2, and when you add the hindsight of the looming Ferrari deal, #Blessed's thought process becomes a whole lot more clear around this point. Born on January 7th, 1985, Hamilton is 39 as of the making of this video. Very few racing drivers can boast about being anywhere near their prime at that age, and by very few racing drivers, I mean pretty much just Fernando Alonso. Mercedes are now in a rebuilding process, and after 3 seasons of we'll get it next year, it's beginning to become clear that the Brackley-based team's return to the top is going to take a lot longer than expected. Now, it's very rare that I take a line from Drive to Survivor's gospel, but as Lewis says in that series, he hasn't got that sort of time. And when we look at his form throughout the first few races of 2024, I'm beginning to wonder if he has any left at all at this point. Qualifying for the opening round in Bahrain saw Hamilton almost fail to get out of Q1. Q2 didn't look any more comfortable, this time for either of the Mercedes drivers, but come Q3, it was clear who the faster Silver Arrow was, and it wasn't Lewis Hamilton. George Russell was only 2 tenths ahead of his more experienced teammates, but in such a tight 2024 field, besides maybe Alpine, that means the difference between 3rd and 9th on the grid for Sunday's race. That quali result would hamper Hamilton's progress in said Grand Prix, Lewis only able to improve to 7th, whilst Russell came home 2 places ahead, having lost out to the Ferraris. The gap between the pair would shrink very slightly come round 2 in Jeddah, but it would be consistently felt all throughout the weekend, George always a little ahead of Lewis, resulting in Russell edging Hamilton in quali once again. This time, Lewis would drop from 8th to 9th in the race, and whilst part of this fell down to a gamble on strategy, Lewis claimed it was the best result he could have gotten. It's that comment that's most concerning from my point of view, and as a known Ricardo simp, if we're going to castrate the honey badger for those types of remarks, #Blessed isn't escaping the dick chopping either. By race 3 in Australia, the deficit to Russell had improved significantly, but he was still behind and the rest of the grid had done better. That saw Hamilton knocked out of Q2 in 11th, and whilst his engine committing suicide halfway through the race will mean it's impossible to know if he'd actually managed to turn that around, let's be honest, from what we did see, it was a bit of a sorry picture once again. Russell ended up a lot further up the road, battling for strong points once again before Alonso used his Jedi Force powers to send the number 63 car into the wall. Or something. So where does that leave us? Well, after 3 races, George is 3-0 up on both quali and race day head-to-heads, lying 7th in the championship with Hamilton 3 places further down in 10th. Factoring in the Australia double DNF, that doesn't sound too awful. Then we realise that Lance Stroll is 9th, and Lewis, it's time for you to head to Formula E. Before you start screaming at me and blaming this on the engine failure in Australia, you're forgetting that Stroll became one with the Jeddah Corniche circuit in round 2, so they're even on race finishes. Given the amount of shit we throw at Lance on a daily basis, we can't just brush this under the rug, so we've got to establish just what's gone wrong here. Is it the car? Or is it Lewis? Well, we know already that the W15 is just as crap to drive as any of its two predecessors, except this one will perform the occasional striptease to make us all think it might actually be good every once in a while. We know the car doesn't handle to how Lewis wants or expects it, but my question to you is, after 3 years of the same old story, can we really still use that as much of an excuse? Again, I bring up Ricciardo, who claims to not feel totally comfortable with his machinery. Granted, the comparison isn't quite as good this time. Daniel's struggles have surmounted across different teams and car ideologies, but when you look at the other side of the garage, at George Russell, he seems to have adapted better. So why isn't Lewis? It may very well come down to the nature of the current ground effect era of car, and perhaps a better way to look at things would be to juxtapose Lewis's Mercedes struggles with Sebastian Vettel's 2014 season at Red Bull. Having come out of 4 years of dominance in 2013, Seb really struggled to adapt to the new turbo hybrid cars the following year. All the while, his younger teammate, who conveniently happens to be Daniel Ricciardo again, adapted much quicker and established himself as the new leader of that Red Bull outfit. Seb would of course jump ship at the end of the year to none other than Ferrari, finding some of his old form and putting himself back in the contention for championships before the Scuderia pulled him out again. Maybe then that's just what Lewis needs, a fresh start at a new team with a different design ideology because they decided they didn't like what the leaders were up to. So there may just be hope for the Team LH fans that are still watching this video and haven't slit their wrists yet. Well done if that is you, by the way. Unfortunately for them, we're still almost a year away from that switch, and with Hamilton in his depression phase so early into 2024, I worry this year could end up being a continued downward spiral, which sees the 7-times champ stock in the paddock fall a little bit. It's certainly not helping that whilst Hamilton is appearing to struggle at Mercedes, the man Ferrari kicked off the roof of Maranello to replace him is having arguably his best season in F1 to date. People's opinions are already beginning to shift from this being a match made in heaven at the start of the season to actually a poor move on Ferrari's part when you see just what they're going to lose in 2025. Returning to the Vettel comparison, and the big difference between his switch to red overalls and Lewis's is that when Seb did it, he was over 10 years younger compared to Hamilton now. It's very possible that the Brit is past his prime, and this has only been masked by Mercedes' inability to make a functional Formula 1 car over the past 3 seasons. It's an intriguing situation nevertheless, and it'll be interesting to see whether it continues to spiral throughout the rest of this year, or if Hamilton can claw some performance back and end his Mercedes era on a high. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and vote over on the poll on my community page, where I'm sure you can take the piss out of a delusional Mercedes fan if you look hard enough. Thanks so much for getting this far into the video. I know a few of you are still waiting for my latest IndyCar comedy review, and I promise that is coming. In fact, if you're a patron or channel member, you'll have access to that already. And if you'd like early access to my content, or just want to support the channel, you can get involved through the links in this video's description. I'll be back very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.